Welcome back, everybody. This is another episode of the Exodus Project. Once again, I'm joined with my good friend Davon Mays from Clouds of Torah.
Peace, peace. How you doing?
Doing well. How are you?
Good.
And today we're going to put Daniel 9 to rest for good. I hope this is the last time we ever have to address it on this channel. But we're gonna actually show it from Jesus's perspective. Did he think the 70 weeks prophecy foretold his death? And I think in not so much time, we're going to prove that he didn't. So before we get started, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, give Dave and I a big thumbs up, and be sure to check out the description for his books and plenty of others. Helps him out, helps me out, helps everyone out, and you're going to learn something too. So let's do this. All right. You see that?
Putting Daniel 9 to rest.
Oh, also Clouds of Torah presentation. Forgot to write that in there. Okay. So the desolator.
Daniel 9 and 27. And he shall make a strong covenant with many for 1 week. And for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. And on the wing of abomination shall come one who makes desolate until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator.
So pretty clear. At the end of the prophecy, someone's going to show up, wing of abominations, make the land desolate until the decreed end is poured out on the desolator, until the decreed end is poured out on, we've talked about this 1,000 times, Rome, right? So
Well,
everyone knows this. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say everyone's at least familiar with this because even a lot of Christians are very familiar with Daniel 9, at least what it says, the abomination of desolation, all that type of thing. But what the next slide is going to show is what Jesus has to say about it.
Well, what's interesting, it says he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering.
Mm-hmm.
Was Jesus the one who did this? Or
because the temple was still in full effect for at least 30 years after J-Man died.
Right.
We have that in Acts. So
it couldn't be talking about Jesus for sure.
For sure not.
So
yeah. So we actually have direct references to this point in the New Testament from the mouth of Jesus himself. What's funny is nowhere in the New Testament is Daniel 9 ever referenced as an allusion to Jesus's death. What we do have references to Daniel 9 are these. So Jesus says Daniel 9 is not about him.
Luke 19:43, for the days will come upon you when your enemies will set up a barricade around you and surround you and hem you in on every side. Luke 21:20. But when you see Jerusalem surrounded by armies, then know that its desolation has come near. Mark 13:14. But when you see the abomination of desolation standing where he ought not to be, let the reader understand, then let those who are in Judea flee to the mountains.
And when was Jerusalem barricaded? When was Jerusalem surrounded by armies?
About 35 to 40 years after Jesus was executed.
Yep.
Depending on who you ask.
Sure. In fact, according to, mainstream history, the siege of Jerusalem, so not the war, we're not talking about the war, we're talking about the siege of Jerusalem, the final steps before the temple was destroyed, began in April of 70.
Yeah, that's about the most common date that you see. You'll see between 65 and 70 on average, but 70 is like the main date that I've always seen.
Because the siege didn't last long. It wasn't like the first temple's destruction where the siege was quite a long time. The siege of Jerusalem the second time in 70, I think, was about 4 months, I want to say. But he's letting them know, like, this is the culmination of Daniel 9. He agrees with the Jewish interpretation that Daniel 9 is talking about the destruction of the temple.
And he's not placing himself in it. And
no.
As a savior, to tell people, yeah, you're about to get destroyed, you're about to have a desolation, that doesn't sound like any type of salvation that you're preaching. You're sounding like you're about to say you're about to die, and I'm
Sure.
not going to do anything to stop it.
Sure. And what brings this whole topic on is someone in my comments who considers themselves a Bible scholar, they actually sell resources for studying the Bible. They're trying to tell me what Daniel 9's about, and I said, "Listen, your interpretation of Daniel 9 is never referenced anywhere in the New Testament being about the death of Jesus, right?" And he responds with, "Well, if you cross-reference Daniel 9 with Luke 21:20, you'll see that Daniel 9 is referenced in the New Testament from Jesus himself." I said, "Yeah, sure, about the destruction of the temple and the siege of Jerusalem." That has nothing to do with Jesus.
Mm-mm.
35 to 40 years after the man's dead. So self-defeating arguments. I don't understand how the interpretation gets that way, that these people interpret it that it has to be about the crucifixion of Jesus when Jesus himself says it's not about that.
Well, the biggest thing about Daniel 9 is the word Messiah is used there.
Yep, and we're about to
Now,
get in the next slide.
yeah, so if you were to do a word search on the word Messiah in the Tanakh, as spelled out as Messiah, not anointed, not the word Christ, you only see it in Daniel 9.
Yep.
And they assume if it says Messiah, it must be about Jesus. But they
Yep.
forget that there were many Messiahs and the priests were Messiahs.
Yeah, all throughout Leviticus. Yep.
Right. Even throughout the Tanakh, the priests, prophets, there were other Messiahs. And
Saul. David calls Saul God's anointed. Most people vilify Saul.
yeah, Manasseh, as wicked as Manasseh was, he was an anointed king.
Mm-hmm.
So just because the word Messiah is there does not point to it being about Jesus. And when you read it in context, there's nothing that Jesus does that puts him in Daniel 9. He didn't bring an end to sin. He didn't
Right.
stop the sacrifices. Like nothing that you read in Daniel 9 applies to Jesus. So,
Yeah, so I'm glad you segued into that because now we can get right into dishonest Daniel 9 translating.
okay.
So on the left, that's the KJV 1611. And what I have highlighted is verse 25 from Daniel 9. It says, "Unto the Messiah, the Prince." And as you can see throughout there, it's Fractor English, so it's kind of hard to read. But everywhere you would see anointed, it says Messiah with a capital letter. And on the right, I have the Hebrew. And what I have highlighted, Ad Mashiach Nugid. So in that 1611, you see unto the Messiah, the Prince. How do you say the in Hebrew, Devon?
Ha.
Ha. Is there a ha in any of those highlighted Hebrew words?
No, so it's funny that you bring that up because Aaron's called HaMashiach, the Messiah. So they want to say,
Kohen
well,
HaMashiach. Yep.
yeah, when they want to say, oh, it's talking about the Messiah. Well, was Jesus ever a nugget or a prince? Oh,
Nope.
well, they said, well, he's the Prince of Peace, right? Well, a prince again cannot be God. God cannot be a prince. So that kills the Trinitarian argument. And it says, in verse 25, know therefore and
that's
understand that
that's
from
the
the
modern KJV. That was
okay,
that's what they often quote from. That's the modern KJV down there.
right. So the problem is it says, know therefore and understand that from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem. To restore and to build Jerusalem. Jesus didn't restore or build Jerusalem. So verse
Right.
25 couldn't be talking about him either.
Right. And
So
unto is a problem. What does the word ayin dalad mean? Ad. What does that mean?
say that again. I am thou.
Ayin dalad. They're ad Mashiach nugid. Ad. Is that unto?
Odd does not mean unto.
Nope. But what does it mean?
Until now, until I found you, until next time.
Yeah. So, well, those are suggestions for what I should search next. But just until ad just means until. So when you see unto, even that is fatuous. So if you were to read this in just a simple Jewish translation, like the JPS, it would say, from the going forth of the commandment to restore and to build Jerusalem until an anointed prince shall be 7 weeks. So the entire phrasing, the entire phrase is one big mistranslation. And when I have people respond to me say, "Oh, well, I fact check all my translations with the Hebrew," clearly not.
Clearly not. And it even says the street shall be built again and the wall, even in troubled times. So
Mm-hmm.
what Messiah in the New Testament rebuilds Jerusalem in troubled times when it was destroyed in those times in the New Testament?
Sure. Yeah, I think the only person you could even get to fit that bill would be Herod.
And so if Herod's the Messiah,
Isn't that
then
funny?
that would cancel out Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
And who was troubling Herod if the Romans were in charge? Doesn't work.
Yep. So yeah, this is, a verified Hebrew translation. It's a very simple word, even if you look it up in your Bible app. I just wanted to let everyone know, like, hey, I could say it's until my face turns blue, but it's what it means, you know. So I'm sorry, but it's not unto. Like when you say unto, that's meaning like that the decree is to that person, right? But this is talking about a segment of time, like when the decree, aka Jeremiah's
Until.
prophecy, goes forth until Cyrus comes to make the decree, 7 weeks, right? So yeah, it's all fatuous. And as we said earlier, Jesus himself admitted it's not him. This prophecy isn't about him.
And just to clear up one more thing, so what they'll say is, and we've covered this too, but when it says in verse 26, and after 3 and 2 weeks, 3 score and 2 weeks, the Messiah shall be cut off. So this is where they want to go, but not for himself. It doesn't say not for himself. It says he shall have nothing. The
Exactly.
translation for not for
Mm-hmm.
himself really translates the Messiah shall be cut off and shall have nothing, which would
Yep.
imply the priests being cut off in their livelihood, which is the temple and the sacrifices, because we read
Mm-hmm.
before that the person who's going to cause a desolation will stop the sacrifices. He's going to cut off the livelihood of the priests and the
Yep.
temple, which would go back to the Levitical house. So it has nothing to do with a prince of Judah when
Mm-hmm.
you have no kingly people in the New Testament from Judah that actually rule anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that word Messiah does not point to Jesus. It would, of anybody, there's even interpretations it points to the Roman leadership.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So I want to say Antipas is even put in that category. But I have
Mm-hmm.
a video on Daniel 9. I have a book on Daniel 9. Me and Steve have done videos on this. Rabbi Singer has covered this.
Sure.
Like,
Sure.
not for himself does not mean he died for anybody. It literally means he will have nothing. So
Yeah.
that translation is faulty.
Sure. And even one more fatuous point, we'll end it here. If you take a look over there on the 1611, Davon, right after my highlighted thing here, the Messiah, the Prince, comma, shall be 7 weeks, semicolon.
That's a pause.
That's a pause. That's a break in time. And in the Hebrew, the cantillation there in the nekudot is actually a stop, a semicolon. So this is 1611, which goes to show even then they at least maintained that stop. But
Right.
in our modern, did they? Did the modern KJV do the same? Or did they lump it together as one time period? 7 weeks and 3 score to 2 weeks. They took out the semicolon and just added a comma to lump it all
There,
together to make the
right.
prophecies seem cohesive and about Jesus.
And there are some honest translators out there. So if you do your homework, look it up. Um, I mean, we can keep going on this. I mean, but this is not the point. Is basically it's not about Jesus. But again, back in verse 26, it says, the people of the prince shall come and shall destroy the city and the sanctuary.
Mm-hmm.
Where's the salvation in that? This is not talking about a time of salvation. This is talking about destruction. And if the whole point of Jesus was to save Israel, why is he why is Daniel and Jesus confirming that it's going to be destroyed, as we read in
Right.
Luke? That's
Mm-hmm.
not salvation.
Sure. Yep.
And nowhere does it
If
say the people that didn't believe in the Messiah is why it's going to be destroyed.
right.
And
Yeah.
one
Nowhere does Jesus say, because I'm dying, nowhere does he say that like the culmination of Judaism is with my death. No,
right.
but rather, that would have put this to rest 2,000 years ago. But instead, he says, just like the Jewish interpretation, just like Rashi was saying 1,000 years ago, Daniel 9 culminates with the destruction of the Second Temple, and only after that can the Messianic age come, right? And it seems like Jesus was agreeing. When they surround the place, if he even said that, but we're going to go with the fundamentalist idea that sure, that it's not backdated. Um, so if he did say that, he's saying, you know what? Listen, like they're coming. Daniel 9 will be culminated with the siege and destruction of the city. It's not about me. It's about Jerusalem, and it's always been about Jerusalem. And that's the whole point why that understanding of Daniel 9 is found in the New Testament and not the one saying it's about the death of Jesus, because at the time everyone would have just thought that was absolute lunacy. You know what
And
I
he
mean?
would
It would
quoted
have,
it. Yeah. He doesn't
yeah,
say anything about that
exactly.
being about him. Paul doesn't say anything. On top of that, and I'll this would be my last thought on it. When they ask him, when are you going to come back? He says, before the temple is destroyed. He says, not a stone will be left, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not one stone on top of another will be left. So the whole thing is going to be destroyed. He gives a time frame.
Yep,
Well, if he didn't come back before the temple was destroyed, then he lied.
that's right.
We go back and read. Go back and read when he's talking about when they says what will be the sign of your coming, and one of the first things he says is he mentions the temple being destroyed. Well, why?
Yep,
He puts a time frame on that, and in that context, you got to return in that time frame, and that didn't
yep,
happen.
that's right. Yeah, so that's all we have. Pretty comprehensive and pretty simple overview. Jesus said it wasn't about him. The translators lied. We have it right on the screen. Um, but till next time, everybody, Dave on Maze, Clouds of Torah, brilliant content. Please check him out. Check the description, his books, other books, whatever you may need. Drop us some questions. We're always ready and willing and able to answer. But until next time, I'm your host, Steve Eisenhower. This was the Exodus Project. We'll see you next time.